Well, the big question today is Pixar relying on sequels? For a long time, I figured that Pixar, yes, has relied on sequels. Do I still think that? Well, after doing some analyzations, I think that it's a lot more complicated than it seems. And there's definitely reasons why Pixar has gone the route of sequels. I will only be using movies past 2010 since I want to make this a modern comparison and not from years ago where inflation can be huge. But Pixar has certainly had a lot of sequels in the past decade, basically 8 years. There has been 9 Pixar movies in the past 8 years, and 5 of them have been sequels. Is this a problem? Well, according to Pixar pre Toy Story 2 age, where they were forced to make a sequel, yes, it is. Let's just compare the first movie of the decade, which was Toy Story 3. That movie was able to make $450 million domestically and $1 billion worldwide. This was the first sign of, is Disney really starting to become a sequel based company? Because movies just that were not sequels are just not doing as good in the long run and the short run previous. And then 2011 we got Cars 2, which then they had to really think, we can't really rely on sequels even if it's about a series that many kids adore, as it was only able to make 191 million domestically and 562 million worldwide. So I think that that's when they realized that the formula isn't perfect, but the formula for sure is going to work. In 2012, Brave came out, which it earned 237.3 million and 540.4 million worldwide. And I think it was the first crack in Pixar's reinvention. I think they were like, this movie just didn't do as well as we thought or as well as it could have done. So they kind of had to go back to the drawing boards. And then, of course, before their year break, they released Monsters University, which did 268.5 million domestic and 744 million worldwide. This was a success, but at the same time, it really wasn't as good as people thought it would be, especially because of how big the first movie was. It still did outpace the first movie, but in inflation, that's not the case. And then they took a year break, and I think this was kind of Pixar's thinking process and how they would promote movies and how they would try and push out success. And they came back 2015 with 2 original movies, Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur. Inside Out was the crazy success. It got 356.5 million, 857.6 million worldwide. That was some big numbers from Pixar. In fact, at the time, it was basically one of Pixar's biggest movies of all time, and it just proved that Pixar was back in the game. Then later in the year, we realized that Pixar still isn't perfect. When they released a movie that wasn't so critically acclaimed, The Good Dinosaur, which was able to earn 123 million domestically and 332 million worldwide, and this was a major flop for Disney. Major for Pixar. That was just abysmal. They were. This is, I think, when they were going to kind of put the regular originals on the shelf, because if you look at these numbers, they just weren't good. And I think that's because The Good Dinosaur really had no appeal. It didn't really have a plot that was worth going out to the theaters to see. And I think over the years, it has gained some fame, but overall, didn't do that well in the long run. And then we got the mega success in 2016 that was Finding Dory. This movie did insanely well. 486.3 million domestically and 1.029 billion worldwide. This was Pixar's biggest movie domestically, and it was acclaimed, but people were saying that this just wasn't Pixar's magic. This was kind of a bump in the road for Pixar creatively. It was not as good as the first movie. And yes, it did do really well, but at the end of the day, it just didn't have that Pixar charm. And you can't live off of sequel hype forever, because there are only so many Pixar movies that can be sequelized or made into sequels until they're kind of all gone. So then in 2017, a year later, we got Cars 3, which was, to say the least, good. But it still did not do what they wanted it to do. It traced tremendously under the first two installments, with 153 million domestically and 384 million worldwide. And it kind of didn't have any hype after its first teaser trailer, which is why they probably shouldn't have released that teaser trailer until right before the movie came out. I think if they did this rolling out differently, it would have easily have made $200 million domestically, because the movie was not bad, and it was actually pretty critically acclaimed, but it didn't prevail. It was just kind of a disaster for Pixar, because if you look at Finding Dory, that drop off was huge to Cars 3, which proved how unstable they were as a studio. At the end of the day, they just were not making consistent numbers. And then later in the year, we got a huge success, which was Coco. It earned a pretty measly $209.7 million in the US, but worldwide it earned $806.5 million, which was the fourth biggest movie of the 9 worldwide. But still, it just showed that in the USA, Disney Pixar was, Coco did really well on Blu-ray sales, obviously, because a lot of people didn't get out to the theaters, but it broke a lot of records in Mexico, which is kind of why this number was so high. But it still was a huge success. So on an average, Pixar originals do $231.7 million domestically and $634.2 million worldwide, which I can say is something really good. Animation studios today have been just, not that successful, except for their counterpart, which is actually kind of starting to exceed Pixar. And for sequels, they do even better. 302.8 million domestic average, 757.3 million worldwide average. So this isn't a big gap. But if you look at the height, the biggest movie for Pixar for domestically was Finding Dory, and it was Toy Story 3 for the biggest worldwide movie. Those earned way more than the biggest worldwide domestic movie for originals, which was Inside Out. They both tracked around 200 million more on both fronts. So it kind of proved that sequels are the ones that broke the records, and originals are the ones that had the staying power. And if you look at Incredibles 2, I'm predicting that that's going to open up with over 130 million, and it'll definitely hit over 400 million domestically and being another record breaker for Disney Pixar. But back to the question: Does Disney really rely on sequels or Pixar? No, they don't. This is kind of a stupid question for sure, because I've seen it a lot. They don't rely on sequels, but they definitely have been doing a lot of sequels because they're creatively probably in a drought right now. But do I think that they really are doing this because they don't have any other choice? Absolutely not. Because at the end of the day, their sequels actually don't get as much acclaim as their originals, as Coco and Inside Out are simply the most acclaimed movies out of the Pixar bunch for this decade. Maybe Toy Story 3 can contest them, but in my humble opinion, I definitely cannot say that I like Toy Story 3 more than either of those movies. But yes, does Pixar rely on sequels to break the records? Yeah, they do. They do rely on that, because Inside Out was huge, Coco was huge, but were they really record breakers in countries like the US? No, they did amazingly. They did huge, but they weren't record breakers. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm sorry that I took such a long break, and I want to try to get back to regular uploads. But I'll start doing box office reviews, and I'm going to see The Incredibles 2 this Wednesday, so make sure to review that and of course predict its box office. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful evening or day.